In a previous episode, I talked about the Showtime show Billions, an American television drama series about venture capitalists and investors who are really like backstabbing SOBs. And many subscribers ask about the strategies that they see in the Billions show. And we're going to address some of those strategies, both in their dramatic nature and how you might use them in real life. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, where we teach you how to be more influential and help you gain leverage in the environment around you, in the business and career world that you face every day. Now, that's kind of what they're doing in the Billions. So the show of Billions, the premise is the main uh, so Chuck Rhoades and Bobby Axelrod, they are the main characters that are constantly in conflict with each other, but they're also trying to work deals in New York City to, of course, increase and create billions. They have stabbing tricks and tips and backroom deals and other things that make the show very interesting, and they seem to be strategic relations strategies. So, for example, Chuck Rhoades, who is a former district attorney, he goes out and he's trying to solve a problem for himself, which is to get him uh, nominated or elected as the attorney general of the state or something like that. And so he's going around doing favors for other people. He's literally finding people who have problems and seeking to solve those problems in a way that binds the individual to do him a favor. So it's like favor brokering. Now, favor brokering could be a strategic relations strategy, but the way they're doing it in the show is it's a lot of backroom deals, a lot of backstabbing, a lot of drama. Now, in a television series, the backstabbing and the problems and the deception that they're creating is really drives the storyline forward. It's something interesting, it's drama, it's no different than a soap opera, by the way. And it is fascinating how they wrap around that the context of the investment world and high technology. And it really sets up a view into a world that likely doesn't really exist, but a view into the world of the rich and famous. So, from a story premise, the backstabbing and the behind the scenes stuff really does seem like that's how people build power, that they build these power bases through backroom deals and shake handshake deals and such and that. But here's the challenge. First off, on the show you see a lot of stuff that's illegal. District attorneys are not supposed to be talking to potential criminal investigations, and then you don't go ruin people's lives. You don't come and you know crush businesses just for the sake of crushing businesses. Not that that thing, it does happen, but ultimately, when you uh, doing what's called racketeering, which is participating and facilitating criminal activities, you're actually on the wrong side of the law, and there's more dollars to find that problem than there are dollars to protect it. Here's what I mean. If you're doing a deal where you're kind of backdoor investing into a private company because you're going to flip the private company onto a public market for the sake of taking that cash out, but the underlying company has little or no value, someone will find that in the due diligence. And if they don't find it in the due diligence, you stand a high liability of actually getting a lawsuit on your hands. So in the risk management world where I spend a lot of time, uh, there's people, whole rooms of people that their job is to do the due diligence, to do what's called beneficial tracing, to go down and find out who owes who what, to go find out who is working with who, or were there any changes before this opportunity came up. Now, if you're doing these leverage deals and you're backstabbing people and you're trying to build your power base at the expense of other people, you actually build a large number of enemies that creates friction in your overall process and makes it require more labor to get what you're looking for. Now, I would advocate that building strategic relationships are important and there is some value to doing folks favors so that they owe you a favor. However, if the favor you do for them is illegal, all they got to do is call somebody up and get you under investigation. They can now, of course, if you have enough dirt on them, it's hard for them to get dirt on you, but they could proxy that to a third party. In fact, you see that demonstrated in the show itself. There's a lot of proxying to a third party. But my point being is the honest path, the high ethical path, isn't always the fastest way to the top. But once you gain that kind of influence, you've gained influence from people who are giving you compliance without fear or without worry that one day you're going to ruin them. And so it's very entertaining to see the backstabbing and the tricks and the backroom deals and everything. But in real life, it's very hard to maintain those types of deals. So that is not the first option when it comes to building big business. I know the news portrays wealthy individuals as having these private deals. And yes, it is true that all the Congress people who yell at each other in the hallways and have all this drama and stuff in the news media do go off and have dinner with each other, and they are social and friendly with each other outside the real world. But ultimately, they can't afford to keep stabbing each other in the back because it creates too many enemies. You don't want to have enemies who will make it their obsession to ruin you. Now, speaking of obsession, there's another element in the show where Bobby Axelrod is very passionate and even obsessed about ruining people who have double crossed him. Now, of course, that it mirrors like the stories about kings that, ruined nations for a spite. But this in real life, that personal obsession to seek revenge very often doesn't turn out very well for the person who's seeking revenge. Forgiveness is often the best route because it cuts off any additional resources in an area that doesn't have a payout. So you'll see Bobby Axelrod go through, and he has this obsession to destroy people. For example, Taylor Mason used to work for him, and she spun off and started her own investment firm, and he wants to ruin her, and he wants to take away all the resources that she has because there's a potential she could be better than him, and he's the boss. He wants to be the big guy. Now, egos like that are wonderful for television. It is so entertaining to see the cat and mouse back and forth and the strategies and the surprises. But again, in real life, it is a lot of fear and frustration and a lot of friction that gets in the way of doing other activities. In fact, I would argue that it's faster to outrun your competition than it is to downright spend any effort trying to wreck them. In fact, I teach in one of our programs how to subjugate your competitors, and that is a more advanced strategy that works extremely well because what you're essentially doing is getting those so called enemies to work on your behalf. So let me give you a practical example. In the case of Taylor Mason having a competitive investment firm, uh, Bobby Axelrod could actually subjugate her investment firm by simply feeding them deals and keeping a cut of the deals. So Axelrod would be utilizing her intelligence. And by the way, this Kate Dillon is an incredible character. The way she plays that role, or I think it's the way they plays that role, um, is very believable and focuses on the intelligence of the character and how that character interacts with the world around them, and essentially is kind of as bad as everybody else, but basically emotionless and difficult to tell what side they're going on or what. But here's my point. In real life, you can subjugate your competitors by for example, feeding them customers. You could feed them so many customers that they lose the capability of getting their own customers, and then they become reliant on the customers that you fed them. Now, if you do this in a malicious way where you're squeezing them out of the market, it can backfire because it's not hard to learn how to get customers. But ultimately, if you're doing it in a cooperative way, you now create a symbiotic relationship that you're on the top. So now, of course, if Bobby Axelrod did this early in the show, um, Taylor Mason leaves the firm and he says, "Oh, by the way, I'd love to see you successful. I'm going to send you decent business so that you can grow and be successful because one day I might need a favor." It would just be a boring show. It just wouldn't be as interesting as the back and forth and the character dynamics. But again, in real life, that obsession with ruining somebody or saving face really is about a low self-esteem and your own ego rather than your value in the marketplace. So instead of saying, well, we're going to get that bastard back because of what he did to us, find ways to basically bury them in kindness. Now, what does that mean? So you don't even have to think about your enemies. In fact, you can be so busy building allies and beneficial relationships that your enemies will eventually come to you and ask for help. And then they're no longer an enemy. They may still be an adversary, but they're no longer an enemy. Let me go over the last one here. One thing in watching this show, and I enjoy the entertainment of the show. I'm not doing analysis and profiles of every episode, but one thing I have noticed is that the real power broker in the show is not Chuck Rhoades. It is not Bobby Axelrod. It is not all these secondary characters that push leverage, but it's actually Wendy Rhoades. And one thing I've been noticing about her character that does happen in the real world and is a very good use of strategic relationships is that she plays both sides of two enemies. Now, this is a little Machiavellian, and you may not find it useful all the time in the real world. But essentially, this woman is the real leader because she takes Bobby Axelrod's fears and Chuck Rhoades' fears and positions each. She kind of sends them out on errands, so they go out and do her bidding, and then they bring all the flow of money, resources, and power to her, and she does it without risk. She's kind of a godfather or godmother, uh, the mafia boss type position where she is the trusted advisor to both main characters. She's positioned herself as a decision gatekeeper. So a lot of times they won't make decisions without her. And she both has the skill and personality to do what these guys are doing, but she does it in a way that's soft and friendly. So she's what we would say tactful. Now I'm the least tactful person in the world, but I certainly can appreciate how she's able to be in the know for the largest amount of information and use that information at arm's length rather than risking her own self in the activity. Now, what's interesting about her as a character, she's a dominatrix in the personal life, and there is kind of a contrast between how she is covertly manipulative in the business world and obviously manipulative in the dominatrix BDSM world. But she has the same conflicts of her own. She's a very human character with her own challenges and concerns. The only difference is she solves problems through other people. She's moving all of the resources her way without being the core risk in the engagement. So there are three lessons right there I wanted to make sure I shared with you guys about influence and strength. A lot of times in the media, they show legitimate relationship strategies, except they do it in a dramatic and interesting way because their role is to entertain, not to teach. So if you're thinking, it feels good to backstab people and feel like you've got the upper hand, but it's a very temporary feeling. Over time, you're going to benefit better with cooperation, collaboration, and simply ignoring your enemies. You don't want to ignore them completely because they could do something to wreck something out because they could have an obsession to ruin you. They could have backstabbing tendencies. But I feel and I see through experience that if you want the greatest amount of influence, the influence that comes with respect and people knowing that they can trust you is the influence that is the most tangible, that is the most easily converted into benefit. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, and this has been a podcast about some three concepts I saw in the Billions American drama television series that is on Showtime. I think I'm watching season 4 right now, and it is just interesting to see how these things play out. And yes, what you see in the show does happen in real life, but it tends to be short lived when it happens in real life. Because again, uh, backstabbing and setting people up for failure is really creating enemies. And then that obsession to ruin somebody, again, distracts from core functions. And often what will happen is somebody else will slip in who is then using your emotional state to benefit themselves without giving themselves any risk. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.